So, hey, everybody. This is another episode of ADHD in a Hurry. My guest today is named Blaize. And Blaize, from what I understand, you do a lot of different things. And I would love to learn more about you, your experiences as a person with ADHD, but also what it is that you do to help others. And if I have a sneaking suspicion, also to help animals, too.
Yes, I'm here to help all the animals with ADHD. I'm just kidding. Thank you, Dustin. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think like most people who have moved through symptoms of ADHD, I have a lot of hobbies. I pick things up and I put them down and I pick them back up like 10 years later.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. But yeah, hi, I'm Blaize, as you said, and I run Weeping Willow Wellness, which is my wellness company where I offer one-on-one somatic coaching based around healing trauma patterns and communication through our body. So that's my primary offer in the world. I also make all kinds of art, from acting, singing, dancing, music making. And like you mentioned, I'm really passionate about helping the animals. So I foster puppies, kittens, and I have many of my own animals. And I'm a parent.
Right. Now, there's a lot about you that I want to get to know better. I wanted to start with, because I'm a parent too.
Cool.
So, and I apologize if I seem distracted. I'm trying to write down ideas as you're mentioning them so I don't forget to bring them back up.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that you're a parent, and everyone's different about how much information, obviously, they share about their kids. But what are some of the challenges that you have experienced, let's say, as a person with ADHD when it comes to parenting? Because I've had a lot of learning experiences recently with my two kids, and I wanted to trade notes with you.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest challenges is just managing my own level of overwhelm with the things I need to accomplish to keep our household running, and then her also continued needs of what the attention that she wants and things she wants to explore. And then also like our varying levels of how much distraction we can have in the space. So she would love to be working on an art project while blasting dubstep, which is completely my fault. And, you know, also reading a book and also like, and so many different things. And for me, like I really can't complete a thought or complete an activity if there are so many different distractions going on.
Sure.
So if she's asking me for help with something while also blasting music, while my roommate is also asking me about something or wanting to like follow some thread of conversation, and I'm trying to do laundry.
Right.
It's just an average day in our household. And I often have to say, okay, we're going to pause the song so I can complete this thing that you need and then complete this button on this conversation and then put the laundry away.
Yes, right. That laundry that Yeah. My kids are 4 and 2.
Cool.
So we're at that age of like, you know, things get chaotic quickly. And now that there's 2 of them, now they're conspiring and working together often. But not always, because sometimes it is them against each other almost, and then it's my wife and or I having to like, you know, work through those challenging waters too. But I've noticed over time how I react to chaos, how my wife kind of reacts to chaos, and how sometimes that's a little bit different on both of our ends.
Yeah.
But you're 100% correct about that. When you hit that point of being overly, there's too much sensory information happening.
Absolutely.
You feel kind of the shutdown happening. Especially sometimes for me, it's a very quick acting, and sometimes it's like a low build over time. And then my brain just kind of hits that shut off point of like, and we're done, right? Like we want nothing more, and that's as much as we can take for now. So I also wanted to hear from you a little bit about what you do personally and or professionally with that kind of buildup. Like you had mentioned about recognizing for yourself, like environmentally, what does and doesn't kind of work for you.
Yeah.
But also being complimentary of other people and recognizing what they may respond better to.
Yeah.
So how does that kind of work for you? Like what kind of brought you, let's say, to that awareness, that mindset?
Yeah. Well, first I'll just start by saying I'm a somatic coach and a somatic practitioner, which if anyone listening doesn't know what somatics is, It's a way of working with healing through the body first. So soma is the Greek root word for body. So somatic practices are physical practices and ways that we work with our body to shift our experience of what's happening, or tend to our experience of what's happening, or shift the physiology of what's happening in our bodies. So my journey with ADHD actually begins many years ago. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term complex PTSD.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's, for anyone listening who doesn't know, complex PTSD comes from complex trauma, which is trauma that is occurring in many instances over time, creating certain patterns of responding to that trauma in our bodies. So for me, I've actually never had a formal diagnosis of ADHD. I've just adopted that as a term because it's helpful for people who, layman's term, just saying ADHD, we understand there's a bunch of symptoms that are relatable. People usually know what we're talking about. And it's more familiar than complex PTSD. And basically where I'm at in my own personal journey is sort of deducing, okay, what of my experience is potentially ADHD? What is from complex trauma? It's hard to say. And I think what we're realizing in the mental health field is that a lot of times we don't get a clear diagnosis. We don't get a rubber stamp that goes, yes, this is what you have. This is how it all lines up nicely. And here's exactly what to do with it.
Right.
And that's right. And that's been my experience. And that's been the experience of lots of people who come to work with me. But what we do know is what we are experiencing. So we may not have, yes, it's for sure ADHD, or yes, it's for sure complex PTSD, but we have, here's the experience I'm having, which is episodes of overwhelm, episodes of social disconnect, episodes of trigger stacking, like you're saying, where it's like things are building up over time and you get to a point where you don't have any more capacity. So the ways that I've learned to work with that through somatics are living your life day to day, very tuned in to your physical experience. Because so much of our lives are structured in a way that we're not really listening to our bodies. We're just going through life on autopilot, all these things we need to do. As a society,
Yeah.
we're very focused on action. And so somatic work is primarily a practice of listening, learning to take little moments throughout your whole day to pause and listen to where you're at and listen to what you might need tended in order to be in a more optimal state where you have a broader capacity for whatever is happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. And that is something that I know for me, I have those moments where I feel really keyed in on what's going on around me.
Yeah.
Kind of, I guess, grounded in a way.
Yeah.
And then I have those other autopilot moments, more frequently, I would say, where, yeah, it just kind of feels like I'm, uh, it's almost like in video games, like your character just is acting in a certain way, right? Like the scripted manner, almost like you really have no control over things. And you're
Yeah.
just kind of going from one thing to another to another. There's
Mm-hmm.
no real sense of connection or awareness in a way of what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would you say it feels kind of like dissociating from yourself a little bit?
Um, I don't know. I would say it's most to me it feels pretty like I'm heavily distracted. Or sometimes what happens is I will overlook a bunch of things, like little tasks, let's say, and then all of a sudden I'm keenly aware of those things that I haven't done, right? Like those little
Mm.
like you mentioned, the laundry, the dishes in the sink are piling up, etc. And all of a sudden I'm like, I have to get all of these things done in like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And I'm almost like rushing my way through all of them. But there are, I guess, some like driving to work, let's say. I remember, you kind of like get in your car and you're driving. Next thing you know, you're like, I'm going over a bridge or something. I'm like, that was 40 minutes ago. How did I get here? You know?
Right.
But there's something about the exercise of driving listening to music or podcasts, let's say, and then my brain just naturally wandering, you know?
Yeah.
And like I said, all of a sudden I'd be crossing a bridge going like, that was 40 minutes of driving that I really could not tell you what I was doing, you know? Which is kind of scary in a way.
A little bit. Yeah, I can relate to that.
But the disconnection's very real at times.
Yeah. Well, and that is a really common way that our bodies cope with overwhelm is disconnecting at a certain point. We can't process anymore at the speed that we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to. And so
Right.
we do divert. So yeah, a lot of the things that I've learned to do for myself and that I've brought to clients that come to me with symptoms of ADHD is learning to connect with the body more and more. So when you have that overwhelm of like pile up of things that you're supposed to do, and you start to freak out about needing to get them all done, learning how to connect first with your breath and
Uh-huh.
self-soothe. Where in your body can you locate a sense of calm? It might literally just be like just the very center of my palm feels calm.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else feels freaking out, but this tiny little part feels calm.
Right.
So letting energy out the other part of the body that feels like it needs a release.
Mm-hmm.
ADHD people, or people who experience symptoms of ADHD, often need more movement than the average person. So taking little movement breaks to just let some crazy energy out and then
Right.
locate the space that feels calm. Maybe it's the very center of the palm, maybe it's just the kneecap, or whatever, wherever it is that you can locate a sense of calm, and tuning into that body part until you feel a little bit more resourced, a little bit more settled.
Right.
And then going, okay, what is just priority one on this list that feels overwhelming and frantic?
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe it's just getting the dishwasher running, or,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. Maybe it's just getting this one bill paid, or whatever it is that's number one. And you just go and do that thing. And while you do it, you stay connected to your breath.
Right.
Stay mindful of your breath while you do it. You actually try to do it more slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And as you move intentionally, more slowly, and more connected to your body, by the end of the day, you've actually accomplished more than if you were just moving frantically, trying to do everything at once and trying to do it
Right.
all in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've noticed, I remember at the very beginning of doing like mindfulness and breathe and like breath work,
Mm-hmm.
I distinctly remember at the very beginning of it being like, this is dumb. You know what I mean? Like, I, yeah, I distinctly remember being like, it's just breathing. Like, who cares? I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
And once I started doing it in a more measured way, and then, like you said, trying to purposefully incorporate it, especially into those stressful moments, like, I'm sure you've had these instances too with your kid of like I'll go into my oldest daughter's room and her room is like a mess, let's say, and I'm like, ugh, like like we just cleaned this room 5 minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
And
Can relate.
I can feel the frustration mounting because it's like, not again, not again, not again, right? And then, but those times where like I do the measured breaths through my nose and holding it and breathing slowly out and feeling that um, self-soothing aspects of things of breathing work, then I was like, oh, now it makes more sense, um and once I kind of got over the resistant part to it, like the
Mm-hmm.
obstinate, like I don't know what it is with ADHD brains, but obstinance is such an easy thing to access sometimes. When something doesn't feel right, or if you make like these snap judgments of like, that doesn't sound appealing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you try it and you try it a couple of times and you start to begin that habit or that structure, that responsiveness. And you're like, oh, now I get it. Right. Um, so the reason I mention this is for anybody listening who is in it in any way like me. Um, it does work on some level. And what I've been trying to push out to people more and more is with the amount of techniques that like I'm building up, like myself personally, but also what I'm trying to like present to other people, is just be as eclectic as you can be. And that the thing that today might not quite jump out at you might be the very thing that you might need, days, weeks, or months, or even years from now, right?
Right.
Um, and I think because we respond so well to novelty and creativity, sometimes those little funky changes, right? Like that little bit of emphasis on, like you said, your palm, your kneecap, I don't know, the point of your nose, like whatever is that part that's not feeling the tension might be the foothold basically that you need to begin to work against that current, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Absolutely. And I think it's the same reason why, we're bringing different modalities into schools for kids who are
Right.
dealing with ADHD. Like why
Right.
are fidget spinners so popular? Because it gives you a little outlet. Like I have a scrunchie in my hand right now that I'm kind of just
Yes.
moving, and it's giving me like a little outlet, a little resource, so that urge I feel to like cut
Mm-hmm.
you off and jump into the conversation, I'm sending that energy
Mm-hmm.
here
Yeah.
so I can stay more present with you and let you complete your thought.
I have my headphone case. I'm twirling it and opening the lid. It's have you ever heard of the term rubber ducking?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this was something that I discovered a year ago by accident. It's in the coding world, like the computer coding world. Um, I forget which company it was or whatever, but these guys in tech were, with computer coding, it's like if you put one character in the wrong spot, the whole thing breaks, right?
Right.
And a lot of it is creating, but then having to sift through the problem parts, the broken parts to see what's broken to fix it. And it's meticulous and it's mind numbing, it's everything else. And what the guys would do is when they noticed that they were running into all of these problems in their coding, they took, I think, originally a rubber duck, some object, and they would just talk to the object from start to finish, every step that they took until they could deduce where the problem was. And
Wow.
they called it rubber ducking. And I was like, that is amazing. It's such a simple thing to do. Um, but when I started making video content and podcasting, I would get so self conscious about like, how do I look? How do I sound? How natural does all
Mhm.
this come off? Right. And I started using little squish toys and things to help keep me focused or get those anxieties out. So it's wonderful to see someone else doing that too. I feel like I'm not alone in that regard.
Absolutely. We all are here in our bodies in this existence in this lifetime, and we get to
Right.
play and figure out what works for us. And I think
Sure.
that bottom line is the most helpful thing, is just understanding that like whether you have complex PTSD or ADHD or any other slew of diagnoses, it doesn't really matter that much. What matters is that we have the experiences that we have. We have the symptoms, or, if symptoms feels too diagnostic, we have the experiences that we have, and we get to play and explore and find what works for us, for our bodies, for our experience right now.
Right.
And that is kind of at the crux of somatic work, is that we are exploring our own bodies to find what supports us in the most creative ways possible.
So this I am kind of new to what it is that you do, even though I have like a conceptual idea of what the specifics are.
Yeah.
How did you go about finding this? Like how did you become a somatic coach?
Yeah. Well, most healers that I know, we found it for ourselves first and
Hmm.
then deep dove into it and, mastered it to a level where we feel ready to bring it to others and support others. And, because it has had such an impact on my life, it feels very, very important to me to
Hmm.
spend a lot of my time and energy bringing it to others. So, as I mentioned, I experienced complex trauma earlier on in my life and was having a challenging time in relationships,
Hmm.
some decisions that I was making that were super unhealthy. And then
Yeah.
as a young parent, single parent, when my daughter was much younger, I was really struggling with managing my own level of overwhelm, like we were talking about before,
Sure.
to a degree that felt um, frightening to me as a young parent. I was
Hmm.
really struggling and seeing the potential impact it could have on her and not being able to show up as a parent the way that I wanted to and the way that I knew was possible.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I kind of just went on this mental health journey, and I had many therapists. And eventually, one of my therapists said, I think you should try somatic work. I think it might be something you should look into.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started down that path, started finding somatic practitioners, coaches, somatic retreats, just exploring it. And then I started studying it. Studying somatic trauma therapy, studying somatic cognitive behavioral therapy, and through applying it to myself and then also studying it, it just showed me that it is a way that works for a lot of people in a way that just talk therapy alone does not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been talking a lot about, well, from my experiences with REBT and CBT therapies, because I've never been medicated for
Mhm.
ADHD. Um, that was just a decision that my parents made, and I just kind of went with.
Yeah.
And then when I was an adult, I guess it never really occurred to me like to do anything differently.
Right.
But a couple of years ago, I was like, I want to make some changes. Like I want to kind of take a look under the hood a bit more and maybe make some new connections, right? And
Mhm.
the person that I found initially was the person I reconnected with last year, virtually at this point. But I got to say, sometimes it really kind of takes the load off. Getting a chance to really hold up something and unpack it and look for the ways in which it might be a bit, irrational or unfounded, or identifying and kind of understanding some of the complex feelings and intense feelings that come with experiences in life, and
Absolutely.
and also importantly to kind of repurpose these things for yourself, like you said, going through kind of that journey, but also learning how to take better care of yourself so
Yeah.
that you feel better put together, and then by extension of that, how you can extend that to help others, right? Even like the the people you work with professionally, but then also those closest to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, because if I'm not living it at home and I'm not able to bring that level of resource and stability to my own most important relationship in the whole world, my
Hmm.
daughter, then yeah, what am I
Right.
even doing?
Yeah.
um,
And there is something to be said about the strength and willingness to recognize when things don't seem to be working, right? Or at least that there might be a better approach to take care of yourself,
yeah,
and then to actually take those next steps and to try, you know.
yeah,
And
absolutely. It's hard work breaking
yeah,
cycles that are in your body, and
right.
I absolutely don't do it perfectly. I mean,
Mhm.
at all. There are
Right.
definitely still days that are so challenging, or
Mhm.
moments where I don't show up in a way that I'm
Right.
proud of.
Yeah,
And
and I think saying those things and seeing it and acknowledging it to yourself and to your kid and is important. Like having a parent that apologizes.
absolutely.
Um there's just so much power in such a fundamental little thing that isn't little in some level.
Yeah.
Um but the willingness to acknowledge to yourself and let's say to your kid, I'm human, and I mess up,
Yep.
but I'm going to try not to next time.
Yeah. Yeah, and the difference I think is that, I see in our relationship not perfect communication. Of course, there's
Hmm.
moments where I'm not as resourced as I could be. I'm in a state of overwhelm that I haven't taken the time to use my somatic tools to soothe yet, and then
Yeah.
that affects our communication. And but the difference is that the baseline that we have built
Hmm.
is a baseline of safety and a baseline of open communication. So she can come to me
Hmm.
and call me out and say, Mom, you're really grumpy. And I feel like, I don't know, the other day she said something to me that was like, ooh, really,
Hmm.
really called me into some greater awareness. She said, I feel like you're sick of me.
Oh
And I
wow.
was like, oh my goodness, why do you think that? Like, we've been having a pretty good weekend, I thought. And she's like, yeah, but the last couple of hours, you've just been focused on all this other stuff. And anytime I come to ask you about something, you just brush me off. And I feel like maybe you just don't want me here. Like, you're just, you've had me for several years and you're sick of me.
Mm-hmm.
Her little 7-year-old brain, was trying to make sense of that.
Right.
And it called me into a greater awareness of, okay, as I am trying to manage all the tasks that I need to do,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't giving her much presence. And, that wasn't some horrible flaw or some great, horrible, but it was affecting her, and it was
Yes.
affecting her feelings and her emotions. And so I was able to, take a moment and just set all these other things that felt so important aside and just, attune with her
Right.
and get in sync with her and just help her understand, all these other things do have some level of pressure on me. And that's beyond what she can understand as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something she really needs to feel cared for, definitely she can bring it to me and she can call me into that moment. Is that relatable for you?
Yeah. No, I think it's funny. My wife and I are having this conversation recently. Like, I have been so distracted lately with like the change in the political climate and everything that's been kind of
Yeah.
going on here in the US. And I have been habitually checking my phone because it feels like every 2 seconds, there's a new update of something happening that's never been done before, that's forever changing things and structure and, all this stuff. So,
Yeah.
and I've been falling victim to this a lot of like the repeated behavior, pulling my phone out and checking it. And she kind of called me on it a little bit, and said something to the effect of like, there are times I think where our kids might, just look over and see you like looking at your phone, and it kind of presents like a wall almost.
Yeah.
And, in the moment, I had a really hard time with that because I was like, that's not true. And then I thought more about it later when I kind of cooled off, and I was like, okay, I get what she's getting at. And, I don't want that to be the case. Like, I don't want that to be the nonverbal signal to them as like, oh, daddy has his phone out, so don't try to play with him or whatever. And like you said, I wouldn't even know how to contextualize to a 2 and a 4-year-old the changed political climate of this country right now. So, I was like, okay, let's
leave them
not
their innocence for a little while longer.
Yes, exactly. But I know for me, and I'm sure for a lot of ADHD folk, the chaotic all or nothing mindset, like that black and white component, is sometimes so easily accessible, and sometimes becomes so dominant of like my thought space that, especially when something is like emotionally taxing on me, when it gets thrown into that means of thinking, it almost makes everything worse, to how I'm internalizing my thoughts and feelings, to how I'm externalizing those to other people. And, and then sometimes feeling frustrated or embarrassed for myself, like how I speak or act or whatever. And then having to then say to myself, like, how am I going to make a change to this? And be consistent with that change and purposeful, So you piqued my interest a bit about techniques that you incorporate, both with yourself, with your daughter, but also with the people you work with. So could you talk to me a little bit more about some examples, some things that you might do? Like if I hired you, let's say if we were working together on this,
absolutely.
how do you kind of go about the restructuring process with me? All right, folks, that's part 1 of my conversation with Blaize. In the next part, we begin talking about some of those problematic, I'll say, repetitive behaviors, like checking one's phone too many times throughout the day. And Blaize helps me kind of look at what's kind of under the hood as to why I might be doing such behaviors. what's the intended effect as opposed to what's actually happening. Give me some guidance on what to do if I want to make some positive corrective changes. You can learn more about Blaize by checking out weepingwillowwellness.com. So I would encourage you to stay current. You can subscribe to any one of my platforms. I have a few more awesome conversations coming up in the coming weeks. Thank you so much, Blaize. Thank you so much to you, the listener, and have a great day.